This is the 21st season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, AFTCO, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing right off the rip. One of the first recorded shows of the 2025 season. I know that the hotly contested Bassmaster Elite Series just wrapped up on famed Lake Okeechobee, I believe, which is the fifth largest freshwater lake fully contained inside of the United States. We will be going live. I'm actually at the Bassmaster Open practicing on Kentucky Lake Division 2. We'll be going live Tuesday evening with Matt Steffen, Miles Berghoff from the house there, but wanted to get a couple recorded shows in this week to make sure we had a full week of BTLs. And boy, from the looks of things, recording the show on a Thursday evening after the first day of Okeechobee, there's going to be a lot to talk about on Tuesday when we go back live. But if you've been listening to the BTLs this past week, had some really good guests, legendary Rick Pierce from Bass Cat Boats, talking about 40, 50 years in the industry. He's still competing in tournaments as well. Randall Tharp, millions of dollars in earnings there, got his take on stuff. Younger angler Jacob Wall, we had a 2.5 hour show where he kind of talked about what's going on over at on the BPT, and then a bunch of news from the industry. So I'm going to be honest, guys, like I've been a little bit of industry fatigue. It's happened a little bit before. It happened kind of during the split in that 2018, 19, 20 time frame where, you know, you do these shows, you're talking about fishing, you're talking about tournaments, how things are done, how the guys are catching them. You know, you got Mike McClellan on, who's giving tips on a McStick, stuff like that. And then you end up in this, I don't want to call it a rut, but it's like an endless news cycle of industry news that has nothing to do with actually catching fish. But I mean, it's the industry that we're in. So there's been a guest that has been on my radar for a decade. This is no joke, a decade. I started watching his content 10 years ago when I was the pro staff manager for Pure Fishing. That was back in the day. I carried like 2 rods for everybody on the Pure Fishing pro staff, and then I carried like 70 rods for Mike Iaconelli, because miraculously Ike goes through fishing rods like most of us go through paper plates. So I did that for a couple years, but one of the key contacts there was Kevin Jarnigan, who I worked with through a place called Blue Heron Communications, legendary. Gary and Ron Judici ran that. And Kevin had a buddy who worked at Field and Stream. And part of the job there was like, you know, you're trying to get your product in the magazines, on the shows, on the TV and all that stuff. And there's a dude at Field and Stream named Joe Cermele, who also had like a very cutting edge fishing show at the time online. It was like heavy metal and rock music, a lot of big personalities out on the East Coast. And it was called Hook Shots. And they would be like fishing for rockfish, which is also like striper. And then they would do like just like gnarly stuff in Jersey, just stuff that wasn't tournament bass fishing. So I said, you know what? I'm going to reach out to Joe. I think I had correspondence with him maybe 2 or 3 times before in my life, just through Facebook or Instagram. And we're going to have a good old fashioned For the Love of Fishing show. And I also want to get his take because, I mean, he's worked independently. He's the fishing editor for Field and Stream, I think, for over a decade. He did some work for a number of years with MeatEater, which is, you know, by far and away the king of content in that hunting outdoor space. With what they've done is amazing. Get a little bit of his take on what the outside world thinks of bass fishing, and then just talk fishing because he's done a lot of cool stuff. Right now, he currently is independent. We'll bring him in, let him tell the story. Joe, thanks for jumping on BTL. Was that a fair introduction?
That was one of the nicest. I was sitting here in the backstage listening to that. 10 years, man, it shouldn't have taken that long. I would have done this anytime, brother. But I'm
I mean,
truly
it was
flattered.
longer than 10 years, isn't it? That you like, when did you start like the first episodes of Hook Shots?
Oh man, you're gonna make me age myself. 2008, and I did that for 11 years. Yeah. So I also I just got to say, listening to you, I'm actually happy to be like the guy that like helps you chill out and take a little break from all the crazy tournament stuff. I'm good with that. That's fine. That works.
It is. Let me just so like I said, this is Thursday when we're recording it. Let me pull my phone up here and I'll do recent. And I will see. So yesterday, I either made or received 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 67 phone calls.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. And none of them were like, dude, let me tell you how great a day I had on the water and how much fun it was. No, it was none of those.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and look, man, let's just be transparent with your audience, right? We were rapping before we started, and he's like, "Do you know what's going on with the tournaments and everything, and what a crazy week it's been?" And I was like, "Nope, I have not been following along." So I'm learning today from you.
So this is going to be the perfect. So I basically have a lot of questions on how you ended up where you are, because right now you make your living as a freelancer with a podcast called Cut and Retie.
Yes, sir.
That does not focus on bass, but focuses on kind of multi-species around the East Coast.
Yeah, no, man. I wouldn't say just East Coast, but what does Cut and Retie focus on? Anything and everything. I'm the guy that'll soak a shiner, throw a frog, cast a fly. I don't care. And really, my show is more about personalities than how to catch fish by a mile. I would hope it's not very how-to focused. And I consider myself a little bit more of an entertainer, and I'm just ate up. I always have been with fishing cultures, man. Like what makes different anglers and different groups tick. So I'm kind of all over the place.
I got into the industry in 2008 too. I mean, are we too old? Like, is it appropriate to ask how old you are? I just turned 40.
I just turned 42 in December.
Okay, so we're kind of around the same thing. Yeah. I've been doing it full time since 2008. Kind of the same with you. So your first gig in the industry, you were the fishing editor for Field and Stream.
I was, but that was not my first gig, man. I started off local at a local New Jersey magazine, and actually, I graduated college in 2005 and was interning at Saltwater Sportsman magazine, and then took a job there right out of school. So my first full-time gig was with Saltwater Sportsman, and then it was Field and Stream after that.
And then you were with Field and Stream for a number of years. For
12 years with Field and Stream, and towards the end of it, I actually doubled as the fishing editor of Outdoor Life, too. I'm the only person to ever be the fishing editor of both titles simultaneously, because they were owned by the same company. Yeah.
I feel like in the bubble that we live in the high-end professional bass fishing tournament world, we forget that there are literally millions of individuals who enjoy fishing outside of like they don't like you dealt with a subset or a group of anglers that did not look at fishing as something stressful. They literally looked at it as something that was stress relief for them.
Sure. And I mean, really, that's the funny thing. So, I mean, I've rubbed elbows with so many pros over the years, fished with a bunch, call a bunch of them friends. And, you know, what I always say is, make no mistake, I have the utmost respect for what you guys do. Like if you are good enough or think you're good enough to put in all that money and hard work to make a living, make money catching fish, utmost respect. But to your point, it's not my world, because fishing is a de-stressor to me, man. I go fish to forget about all the shit that like I'm worried about, you know? So it's not, I've fished one money tournament in my entire life. I got beaten very badly, and my takeaway was like, why did I just throw all that?
Where was it? Where do you know when and where it was?
Oh yeah, dude, it wasn't bass. It was the Mako Mania tournament, offshore tournament, shark tournament. Yeah, and you know, I was in my 20s and had a crew of guys that were a little older than me. They had a real nice boat, and we shark and tuna fished all the time. So it's like, let's do it. And it's like, all right, we're all going to put in $500 and then we'll throw in for the Calcuttas, and like, we're going to go hard, man. We're going to win this thing. But when you're 22 years old, putting up $500, like that's a That's a lot of money. And it was rougher than hell. Didn't see a fish. Half the guys got seasick. We got the snot beat out of us. Came in 1-0. And then all of a sudden the fire's gone. And I'm like, I really needed that $500 for my car insurance. Like, that was a really stupid thing to do. That's the one and only money tournament I've ever fished. And
so no bass tournaments. Like, you've never gone out there and tried to catch your best five and cull up and come in and weigh them in.
Never.
No desire.
No, I fished one semi-bass tournament. It was a fly tournament up on Lake Champlain, but it was all beers and bragging rights. There was no money, man.
A fly fishing event for bass on Champlain?
Yeah, out of a drift boat that belongs on a river. We were out there tooling around in a tiny little trout drift boat on big old Champlain. It's called the Ditch Pickle Classic. They still do it every year. Yeah.
That's what all the steelheaders when I was up in Alaska called me. My buddy Owen, who he lives up there. He lives out of Kenai, right? And we went to Anchor River, and he's like, "This is steelheading." Well, for one, I thought I was legitimately gonna get murdered because I had a 10-foot spinning rod with a. I mean, I wasn't throwing a fly rod. It's basically what it came down to. And then we went to eat afterwards, and literally, like, in a condescending tone, one of his buddies goes, "Oh, you're the ditch pickle fisherman." And I'm like, dude, you fish for you're taking the trout way too seriously, bro. Like, you're up in Alaska. Look how beautiful, but they take that stuff just as seriously.
Sure. And this is the stuff that I have so much fun poking fun at on my show and exploring, is like just that. I love to fly fish, man. I've been fly fishing practically my whole life, but I'll also throw a jerk bait at a trout and I don't really care, so but yeah, that sounds like steelheaders.
Oh, dude, not the brown trout. I've never met a brown trout that won't eat a jerk bait.
Nope. But every time I do it, somebody calls me a heathen. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, that's terrible. But
we got a little bit sidetracked there. But I want to get back to the Field and Stream. So, as the fishing editor of Field and Stream, how did you? I would imagine that would be a tough ask, because it's similar to like that in fisherman vibe, right? Where you've got a lot of people that like to fish for multi-species, but there's also, whether it's a walleye or a trout or live bait fishermen, artificial. How did you determine what type of content went into the fishing section of Field and Stream, which was a very diverse reading public?
Yeah, I mean, it was cool in the sense that, once you're there, once you get that position, like the monthly fishing column was pretty much at my discretion. That's my voice. Okay. That's my column. I own that essentially. Mm-hmm. But I mean, yeah, you do have to have a sense, especially, with a national title like that. And remember, back then we were 11 issues a year. Nobody does that anymore. I mean, no. Dude, in that span of time, it, like you said, we're the same age. The way media has changed from 2005 to now, it's ridiculous. It's like going from, horse and buggy to cars, you know what I mean? But no, I mean, you have to recognize that you don't always get to cover the fish that you like. You do have to be aware. I mean, I'm not a walleye guy, but, seasonally every fall, dude, you don't do a walleye section or a fishing section in the fall without at least one walleye piece. And really, in terms of features for the magazine, I mean, I wasn't the last word. That was a lot of, getting together with the entire editorial team and going, okay, it's July. We need a big bass feature. What do we do? So it wasn't exactly like if it was related to fish, I was the last word. We had a great team. I mean, those were great days. I was working in Manhattan and, very different than it is now. It was like a powerhouse. There was a whole floor of people and it was buzzing, that was like
Field and Stream was based in an office out of Manhattan.
Always was, man. Absolutely.
Wait, what? I had no idea. I was thinking like log cabin up north somewhere.
No, sir. Midtown Manhattan. That's where Outdoor Life and Saltwater Sportsman were too. Because you got to remember, if you go way back 50, 60, 70 years when magazines were king before all this social media and stuff we're doing now, those were big titles that needed and wanted to be in the hub of publishing. Well, where was the heart of
New York
the publishing industry? It was New York City. Yeah. Yep.
What percent of your reader base would you say were bass fishermen? And then what subset of the guys who fish for bass would you say followed tournament fishing when you were at Field and Stream from 2008 to 2019? 2019. So basically the the span of the Elite Series from 2008 up until the split?
Well, it's really hard to answer that. I mean, I don't have hard data to support it, but I mean, you never passed on bass at certain times a year, because if you did a reader survey or whatever it may be, or for that matter, you talk to your ad team, you're always working with the ad team, marketing team, like what do we need based on what ads we can sell in. There was always a sense that you don't sleep on bass. Bass is always number one. There should be a little something bassy in every issue. So if it's December and you can sneak a 300-word winter bass tip in there, you do it. If it's July, I feel like July was always our big fishing issue. And quite often, man, that main package, that biggest feature in there, the cover package, would center around bass. But it's really hard to say how many of our readers were diehard tournament guys. What I do know is that we leaned on tournament anglers a lot for that information. I mean, that's just sort of what you did. And I knew a lot of them. We had some great writers. I don't know if you know Pete Robbins, worked with us a lot.
Been on the show probably 4 or 5
Oh, has
times.
he? I haven't talked to Pete in forever. Pete is such a nice guy, but Pete was one of our go-tos because he had everything wired. And it was really fun. I think one of the last ones I worked on before I left was we came up with this idea, $1 million lures, right? Which lures have won somebody $1 million? And it was pretty neat because then we'd get all these lures and we had this budget to dip them in gold and have them dripping and coming out, to photograph them. Those were the glory days. So Bass Pros were always there, especially in a big package. We would lean on Bass Pros more than, say, Bass Guides as the sources for things like that. But, thinking back to editors' letters and things like that, Matt, I really couldn't tell you, in my years there, how many people were really focused on that. But I always looked at it like, that's what Bassmaster Magazine exists for. If that's your world and that's what you love, that's what you're getting. Were they getting that and us? Maybe. I mean, those were also the good days when dudes just, went to the outdoor show and signed up for 9 different subscriptions in one day, So it's hard to say, but bass was always extremely important. And if we were going to put a fish on the cover, I can tell you, both with Field and Stream and Outdoor Life, for the most part, nobody ever wanted to put a fish on the cover because it was a guaranteed dog compared to anything hunting, right? A white-tailed deer on the cover, like you could not beat that, but you had to a couple times a year. And we would do trout and we would do some, this, that, or the other thing. A bass cover always.
I feel like you guys did a bunch of jumping bass covers. I remember seeing like
that was, yeah. I mean, we certainly did, right? And one of the neatest things about working in New York, as much as it kind of sucked, right? It was a horrible commute, but I did it for 12 years because I loved the job. Our entire archive from 1871 to the most current issue was always right there. Like you could go leaf through them and look through them. So yeah, historically in the 80s and 90s, the jumping bass shot. And you'll find this funny, man. I remember one of the things I learned when I started working there, because coming into it as a kid, like, I just grew up reading all this stuff. I'd look at these covers and the older guys would be like, yeah, you know how they did that? They caught a bass and glued it to a stick. And then someone would go underwater and just shove it through the water.
No way.
No way. Well, think about it. That's that's maybe an easier shot to get nowadays.
Yeah.
But back in the 90s, dude, with slides
right through the anal vent.
Exactly. They just put the damn 7-pounder on a stick and somebody would snorkel under the pads and lift that sucker up and they'd shoot it a bunch. That's how those shots
I need
were
to
made.
go look at some old covers.
Dude, you find one with the bass. It's just like perfect and the water is just like shearing off of it perfectly. Come on, man. That bass is on a dowel, on a wooden dowel. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not right. Like I would come back from the Decatur Fishing Expo with like subscriptions to North American Angler, Midwest Outdoors, and Fisherman, all that with the dudes of I'd be like, what did you sign up for? I'd be like, all of it.
You got a free VHS or whatever, so I signed up for all of it.
Usually it'd be like a couple packs of worms.
Yes. Yeah. I still have North American Fishing Club books and VHSs that I never returned. I guess I still owe them money because I used to do that thing where they'd send it to you unsolicited and be like, well, if you like it, send us $20. I don't know. I never sent any of them back, but I'm not too worried about it now.
They had the like the blue the blue hardback books with the gold leaf lettering on it.
Yeah, I just found my son who's 6 now has it. I had a whole binder of like commemorative coins, the walleye coin, the bass coin, the trout coin.
Triangles.
I still had them all. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What was were you like a journalist major, or what was your?
I was, yeah. I majored in journalism with a multimedia track, which was so funny because I'm in college learning how to build a website and within 3 years of getting out of school, like all of that stuff. Every program I learned in college was basically obsolete. So it's just one of those. I look back at college, like I had a great time, but I definitely learned more doing it, having that job out of school and just getting thrown into the fire.
But I mean, you're one of the few guys in the industry that actually like kind of majored in it, used that major to get into the industry straight. I was somewhat the same. I was a communications major, and then immediately started working for the bassown.com website, which kind of used the communication. But so it was during this time. Then this is a part that I really want to get to. I'm going to pull up some archives here.
Oh boy.
So you're at Field and Stream, and is it just through the people that you meet there, or was it part of it, or was it independent that this Hookshot show came about? Because back at the time, like, you have to remember these people, like the people who are listening now, like this was cutting edge stuff back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, at the time, I would have never thought that. It was completely independent, and I'll tell you exactly how it happened. I never did a thing with video in my life. No interest in video. I was a pretty decent photographer. I loved to have my own photos run with my stories, so I cared about photography. And one Christmas, my dad's like, "What do you want?" I'm like, "I don't know. Give me a video camera." He's like, "Why?" I'm like, "I don't know, because I don't have one. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I don't have one." So I got one, started playing with it, and started cutting some video and really enjoyed that. And I just went to my editor and I was like, "Hey, what if I started a web show for us? Is that cool?" And he's like, "Yeah, go for it, man. Worst thing that happens is it doesn't work and we stop doing it." And somehow that show lasted for 11 years. And I was basically a one-man band. I found all the music because I always used independent bands. I wanted real music. Music was a big part of it. Produced it, hosted it, did all the travel arrangements, top to bottom. That show was all me.
What I liked about it was, at the time, back then there wasn't a lot of stuff out on like YouTube. I mean, there was, you could find it, but not, 5% of what's out there right now. And it was like, I could tell that the show was, I really like the genuineness of it, because I've always been about experiences regardless of the species. And you could tell that every show was a really cool experience that you were all in on.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because right now, what I'm about to say is like, this is what everybody says. And that's cool. I'm glad they do. But at the time, I just thought, like, man, most fishing starts and ends on the water. I grew up like you did with Bill Dance. You start on the boat with a bass on the line and you end that way. And I was just thinking, my God, like, so much weird crap happens on fishing trips. Like, it's just not always good. Like, there are disasters, there's glory, there's ridiculous stuff. So in a way, at the time, my only motivation was just like, I'm going to make the fishing show for the guy who's anti-traditional fishing shows. And again, that sounds dumb now because we've come so far and so many people, do exactly the same thing. But I'll tell you, Matt, I didn't look at it as anything revolutionary at the time. I just was like, if this works, I'll get out of the office a lot and go to all kinds of cool places and fish with all kinds of cool people. And that's, it's funny because I'm super proud of being the fishing editor of that magazine. I was the youngest in the history of the magazine, and I cherish that. I do. I still can't believe that happened. But all these years later, even now, having gone through MeatEater and now starting Cut and Retie on my own, I hear about hook shots more than anything else I've ever done. Like, that is the thing that comes up over and over and over again, which is cool. I like that. I'm proud of that.
You can still get on and watch all the old ones on YouTube.
Still on,
if you haven't. Yeah. So like, this is just like an example. So this is like from season 2. But
my God.
What, is this not a good one? I think this is a good example of the.
I don't watch these that much anymore.
Okay, so like this is what what Hook Shots was. Like, this is the beginning. It's just a little 8-minute episode. It's called Field and Stream's Hook Shots, season 2, episode 8, Fall Blitz Jersey Shore.
Oh, I got a fish on. You gotta run over my line, bro. You gotta run over my line, bro. Welcome to Jersey style saltwater fishing.
So this is all you. Like, you're
All
doing
me,
all the
and-
one camera that your dad got you.
Yeah, this is completely me, and you've chosen one here that's like from year one,
Joe Cermele, standing
which is
here
cool.
over
But
the ocean and see right.
my editing
There you
got much better after that. Like, that's a very, very old one you just pulled, man. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wanted to pull I wanted to pull an old one. Like, here's a fishing one from Falcon Lake.
Oh, that was a trip. Yeah.
Multiple crackheads, man.
So this is like 3-4 years later. Oh yeah. And then it's just a just a short little 10-minute episode about the whole thing at Falcon Lake, but there's literally hundreds of these.
Yeah, and it's funny too, man, because when I started those, I was shooting for 10 to 12 minutes, and everybody in the world said, dude, nobody will watch 10 to 12 minutes on the internet in 2008. Like, or like they were like, you're crazy. You have to make these 5 minutes. And now look, YouTube wants 25 minutes out of you,
Yeah. If you had to pick like one character over all of your Hook Shots episodes, like, is there one character that sticks out where even to this day you're like, I cannot believe that human being was real? Because, dude, like, fishermen are interesting, and to get good at fishing, like to become like really good at fishing. We see this in the tournament world a lot. The fact of the matter is, personal development, personal relationships, finances, your life, like, really suffers. There's very few like well-rounded fishing savants.
Yeah.
Would you agree? I mean, you've met way more than I have. I've just met him in the bass fishing world.
Oh, totally. And it's interesting because in the early days of Hook Shots, I leaned a lot on professional guides. I mean, I always did, but the longer that show went on, and then there was a Facebook page tied to it that became sort of this community. I started watching people, just fans who would post stuff, and you sort of have to vet people. But the last few years there, I would go out on a limb every once in a while and say, I'm not going to go with a guide, dude. I'm going to fly out and fish with you, just average Joe. So to answer your question, there's a million people I could talk about, but the one that jumps right into my head is this guy, Dave Strum, Crazy Dave, who looks like a cross between Tom Petty and Jesus. And he lives out in Iowa. Okay. And he fishes brown trout on the driftless and in the driftless region, all these small streams, which is hardcore fly country. I mean, that's like very dainty, technical fly fishing country. Everybody goes there to fly fish. And his whole shtick is that he just throws giant stick baits. He's looking for the biggest ones he can get his hands on. And he goes and throws all these giant stick baits in these little streams. But I'd never been to Iowa before. So we wind up, me and my buddy Mike, in this little town of Decorah, Iowa, just this beautiful little town. But Dave is just like marches to his own beat, man. Like he wasn't married. He took his dog everywhere he went. He walked around, on these streams like barefoot while we're wearing waders, and just like had this long, crazy hair. And he'd be like, you got to get it in there. You got to get it. Snap. And you got to snap it. Snap, snap, pause. Oh, boom. Like he was just nuts. And just last winter, I had a live event in Minneapolis for Cut and Retie. And he drove all the way out from Iowa and showed up at the bar. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, Dave, man, you are the man. But that's what I love. Like I am so much more drawn to, like, that's like sort of the gem, is like, find the guy who's like the interesting or real person. It's the little guy. He's not already famous or some influencer or on TV. That's what I love, is discovering, if you will, these real people.
Fantastic. I like to talk about the next chapter because you were the senior fishing editor for is it like unarguably, like there's no debate, like MeatEater is the king, right? When it comes to the podcast visibility scene, like Brunello, like what they do is massive.
Yeah,
At least in
no
my
doubt.
mind it is. I mean, it's like, it's big.
Yeah, and that's what attracted me to it, right? Because you know, towards the tail end of my time at Field and Stream, you know, there's some shakeup going on in the magazine world then, and we don't have to get into that. But really, by that point, I was really so much more in love with the podcasts and videos that's what I wanted to spend my time doing. You know, not that I love print. That's where I started. My heart always lies there, but I felt like going to MeatEater was the way to put the kinds of content that I really had fallen in love with first, because that is what they put first. They are a forward-facing, you know, organization. It's not as much about the brand as much as it is about the personalities within it. So, you know, I saw that opportunity there and took it. And, you know, I'll just say, as impressive and awe-inspiring as it can be, and seeing what they did, it turned out to not really be the right home for me. But what I learned there in 2 years working with these incredibly professional podcast production teams and sales teams and video teams was truly invaluable. And I wouldn't change that for the world. And even there, you know, I had a series there. I was on a few of their fishing series, but I had one of my own called B-Side Fishing that went for 2 seasons, which was sort of hook shots, only a little bit more profesh. And I insisted on cutting it myself. And they were like, you can do that, but we're going to train you on Adobe Premiere, because I'd only been using iMovie. That's all I knew. Hook shots was iMovie for all those years. That's what I cut with. So it was an incredible learning experience.
Yeah, you also hosted a podcast over there, almost probably right around 100 episodes, called Bent.
Yeah, that was the podcast there, and my co-host was my good friend Miles Nolte, who was the fishing director at the time, and he's still one of my good buds. He's on Cut and Retie all the time. But yeah, Bent was great because hook shots had exposed me to quite a bit of audience over all that time. But then, you know, Bent put me in front of more, and it was funny because the sort of aftermath of that was like all these people reaching out going, where the hell was I for 11 years of hook shots, you know? So it's funny. I had this idea when I went to MeatEater to stop talking about what I did in the past. Like, don't talk about hook shots, don't promote that. Like, that's there and this is now, and just push this going forward. And now, after all this, being independent, I look at it like it's like being in a band. You know, those were your early records. Doesn't mean they're not good. Doesn't mean you shouldn't tell people to go listen to them, you know? So now I just kind of see it as this big collective work.
Dude, I do the same thing. Like, I look back, like every once in a while, I'll run across like a podcast from 2010, and I'm like on there enthusiastically giving my opinion, and I'm like, God, just shut up.
Oh, dude,
myself 15 years ago, just like, you don't know what you're talking about. You sound like an idiot. You're way too keyed up. Just like mellow the hell out and grow up 15 years. But I mean, back then at the time, like, that's it is what it is. And I've just learned to like accept it, and it's all part of the journey.
Yeah, it's fine. I do the same thing. It's not so much with podcasts, but with writing. I was just at a buddy's cabin. I'll make the story very quick, but I was up there in January, and we had this miserable winter, and the stream that I wanted to fish is basically frozen over. Like, you could ice skate down the middle of it, horrible conditions. And on my phone pops this article I wrote for Field and Stream, God knows when, that's like all about why I don't fish in the winter when the rivers look like this anymore. And I'm like, I'm not even following my own advice. You know what I mean? You just, I get bitten by old things I wrote because there's so much of it out there.
Do you ever like, so like, I always thought I had such pretentious openings. Like, I was always trying to be like, instead of just, hey, let's do an informative fishing article. Like, I would always try to like throw something in there that was either like witty or like insightful. And then I just like went back and read, because I wrote a lot of stuff. I would write 4 2,000 word articles a week for BassZone.com, and then also for Bass Times, just a bunch of the publications. I go back and read it, and I'm like, it's like obvious I'm trying too hard back then. I'm like kind of embarrassed by the stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, early stuff, I mean, I could still think, I can think back. I still laugh at the first thing I ever wrote. I started out covering shark and tuna tournaments for a local magazine. And it's like, I don't know, this boat out of Cape May caught the biggest thresher, and it's like, the crew of the Helen whatever let out the shout heard round Cape May, and I'm like, oh dude, like smack your head in it, like. But again, man, you didn't know. You learn. You come up. But I will tell you, like, I've always tried to be witty and funny, and hopefully, I think I found my voice at some point.
I mean, if you haven't found your voice, I probably wouldn't have had you on BTL or invited you to come on the show. So
yeah, but
it worked for me.
Yeah, but one thing I will say is, because of where I grew up in Jersey, you know, and in the striper surf scene, years ago, I wrote a feature article about a jetty in New Jersey for New Jersey Angler magazine. And I was fishing this place a lot, but not as much as a lot of people around here. And I just threw down on this article that made it sound like I am the king of this jetty. I know better, and like I am the expert here. Well, dude, I mean, that was spot burning before spot burning days.
Oh, yeah.
I got lit up for it. And I'm glad that happened. I mean that, because going forward in my career from there, I was always cognizant of that and giving credit where credit's due. Don't learn something from this guy and then write an article like you made that shit up. You know, I've always been about attributing and saying this guy taught me this, or, you know, whatever. So it was a lesson that I was glad to learn very early.
We're talking with Joe Cermele, host of Cut and Retie, long career in the outdoor and fishing arena. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to touch one more thing on MeatEater, and then we'll jump into kind of the current times with what you are working on now. I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it, though. Like, I would just be curious, and I know you don't like speak for them. You're there for a couple years, but like that, the vibe at a place like MeatEater for like tournament fishing. I know that they had Brandon Polinick and Carl Jocumsen on the show and things. It is outdoors. They do, you know, for the seasons, we'll have fishing shows. But like, is that even on the radar of the big outdoors things? What is that vibe for such a big production that focuses so much on, like, you know, the nature and the experience, and that what that is when you bring in the sparkly bass boats and the sponsors and the high dollars and the 250 horsepowers and 100 boats racing at 70 miles to themselves and sell it to the. I'd be interested to get your take on it. It's Joe Cermele. It's BTL on a Monday. We'll be back right after this.
This is Gamakatsu's new Nano Alpha line of hooks. If it looks familiar, that's because they are. It's the same shapes and sizes in the round bend and the EWG and in the new Horizon head that you know and love from Gamakatsu, but there are a couple new features with this Nano Alpha, which is this little green label that you see on the packaging. First off, 2 times faster hook penetration. That's because of the Nano Alpha smooth coating on it, and also it is 4 times more corrosion resistant. Check it out, Nano Alpha.
I've been using Sunline Shooter for the majority of my career. Millions of dollars made, lots of bass caught, and the gnarly stuff. If you need a abrasion resistant, tough fishing line for the really, really mean stuff, Sunline Shooter is for you.
Everything you need, one legendary brand. Top on Strike King. Gear that just plain works. Cast after cast after cast. AFTCO. Any fish, any water.
Pro Bass Adventures is reinventing Mexico bass fishing. With boats equipped with 12-inch Garmin units and LiveScope Plus, free loaner fishing rods, and no-cost airport transportation, Pro Bass Adventures is proudly putting you in the best position for success. Pro Bass Adventures has lodges on Lake Baccarat and Lake El Salto, Mexico's 2 best trophy largemouth bass lakes. Visit probassadventures.com or email probassadventures@gmail.com. The official Mexico fishing lodge of Bass Talk Live. Hi, welcome back. BTL talking with Joe Cermele. I'm going to detour before we get back to MeatEater. This is at the risk of it. You might not be the guy I'm thinking of. But if that's the case, we'll just get right back to MeatEater. Did you do a fly fishing deal in Mexico for big bass?
I did, yeah. At
that was
Picachos, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I remember that. That was awesome. Like,
yeah.
I remember watching that episode, and wasn't it like, God, this is, how long ago was that? Because I watched it right after it came out. I remember it was like a struggle. You hooked some big fish.
I want to say 2018, I got invited down there. My buddy Tim Romano, who's a big-time photographer and fly fisherman. Yeah, that was probably the second to last, or maybe even the last season of Hook Shots. But yeah, the guys at Anglers Inn wanted us to come to Picachos specifically to fly fish, because they were trying to hype that lake to fly guys over El Salto. I thought it was amazing. It took us a little while to get dialed, but once we did, it was amazing.
Yeah, I've been to El Salto twice now, and it's just so dumb.
Yeah,
it's so dumb. Like we had like 19 in like a 2-hour topwater period. Me and my buddy Darren, we had 19 over 6 on a scale eat a spook.
Yeah, well, dude, my biggest largemouth to date is still 8.5. Right, I've not broken 10. And you had mentioned Kevin Jarnigan, our mutual friend, in your intro, and I've been to El Salto with him, and there were a couple 10s, maybe an 11 caught when we were there, but it was all guys dropping, straight down those submerged trees. And I was straight up like, I don't want to do that. I'd rather catch the smaller ones on the spooks or spinner baits over here. Like, that's too technical for me. I don't want to do that. So, like, to give you an idea what kind of bass fisherman I am, although I have gotten very into glide baits lately. So maybe that'll be my tenets. Yeah, I'm late to the party, but I've been enjoying it.
No, you got to go back to El Salto. My buddy Kevin Rogers just went there, and he had like several 80+ fish days in January and on like every glide too.
Yeah.
Like when we were there in December, they hadn't really moved. Like I wouldn't say they moved up in waves yet. I'm not acting like I know the fish movements on Lake El Salto. It seemed like they were very pre-spawn when we were there in early December. And then I think they moved up by the time he was there, because dude, he literally texted me one day at lunch and was like, because they got Elon's deal going there, so you can go in and have a margarita and make sure what's going on in America's copacetic.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, 60 before lunch on a glide. It's like,
yeah. Nah, dude, I've caught the bug. I got some buddies who make some nice ones. So like, even I might tomorrow after we record this, I think the ice on a couple of lakes here has finally come off. Like, I'm chomping at the bit, like that. But that's a fairly recent thing for me.
Very nice. All right. I just want to touch on this. Like I said, MeatEater's had Polinick. They've had Jacobson on. Like, that whole crew, the Casa crew, when you listen to that, they sound like they respect it, don't really understand how professional bass fishing works, somewhat intrigued with how it works. Also, maybe a little like, not sure about this thing.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the vibe that you got from working with that? Like, what is the outside world, the outdoor industry outside of the bass fishing world? You've been around a lot of these guys, whether it be field and stream, whether it be in the boat with them, other species, the MeatEater thing. What would you say the general consensus, you can be brutally honest here, is of the tournament and professional bass fishing world outside? Or are we so self-absorbed that we think everyone else is following the tournament world outside and it really doesn't exist and not talked about at all?
Well, I don't know. Are you self-absorbed? That I can't answer. And I'll do the best that I can here. I don't think that that there's sort of a lack of love or respect for it. I've just always looked at pro bass fishing like any sport. Either you're in or you're out. Some people are ate up with NASCAR. Some people are not. I'm not a sports guy at all, man. Like, and I live right outside of Philly. The only game I watched was them, kill the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I don't really do sports, right?
Okay.
So, to get back to your question about MeatEater, I do think that there's a respect there for those skills, just as I have it. But at the same time, if you look at that brand, and I certainly don't want to speak for them, but
Yeah.
that's hinged on, harvesting, you know what I mean? So just catch and release fishing in general, not, not really their thing, which is part of the reason why it was difficult for me to make that home, because I eat fish, right? But not always. I catch and release too. But and this is the truth. In my circles, I know a lot of anglers. I have friends all over this country. We're shooting the breeze all the time. Even the ones that I know are into pro bass fishing don't bring it up to me because they know I'm not. So I never hear anybody in a lot of my circles, just go, "Hey, did you see what so and so did on Okeechobee last week?" I just feel like pro bass fishing, you are either in or you're out. And those who are out aren't really thinking about it at all, to be completely honest. Like they're just not thinking about it at all. They're thinking about fishing and doing their own thing and maybe catching their own bass or whatever. But I find it very, very niche, and that we're not thinking about it one way or the other. We're just not thinking about it.
I couldn't agree more. I'm totally with it. I do think that, so similar to, like, let me see if this comparison's right. So like Formula One. I don't follow Formula One. I could name a couple guys. I've watched the Drive to Succeed, or whatever the documentary is. Like, you get in on that and you watch them and you're like, boy, these guys are crazy. And they're like little bitty guys with these big personalities. But a lot of I'm going to butcher this, but the gist of it is there's a lot of safety innovations and automobile innovations that are derived from Formula One that trickle down through all of the different brands that, when we get in our car on a daily basis, like there's some sort of link up there that transfers down. I think, from my skewed perception, a lot of that is like professional bass fishing with recreational fishing too. So there's a lot of things that maybe you wouldn't do as recreational fishermen, and you may not even know how the Pro Tour works. You might not have ever heard of Kevin Van Dam, but like, you're throwing a square bill crankbait with your kid because Kevin designed that thing to win Elite Series tournaments on the Elite Series for Strike King. And it's like that trickle down effect to where, even though it might not be relevant in your life, it's impacted your fishing experience.
I could not agree with that more. Right. I completely agree that pro bass fishing historically, then and now, has shaped recreational bass fishing, whether you follow the Pro Tour or not. There's no doubt about that. And I think to some degree, Matt, you're right. With certain lures and things, it's like, all right, KVD designed that. I heard that somewhere or read that or know that, so I'm going to try that. But really, and maybe this is me just being cynical. Like, you look at something like the Senko, that ultimately trickled down from that world too. And now everybody uses that. So while these things do trickle down, do the people it trickles down to who adopt it really know or care which pro or who was doing it or where it came from? Or now, right? Did you just see some kid on YouTube using it? Was that the reason? So even there, you're 100% right. Like, it shapes recreational bass fishing, but how many recreational bass fishermen are paying that much attention and knowing that? I'll give you a great example. I'm a huge fan of the Smith with Rattlin' Rogue, right? Like, it's like one of my favorite stick baits. I like the Junior. It suspends real nice with one suspend dot.
I might know a guy who could hook you up with some of those, Joe.
I know the same guy, and there's some in the mail because I just lost a bunch.
Okay.
But you have probably other guys. But somebody said to me not long ago, they're like, yeah, they were about to go away until KVD won a tournament on them, and then they came roaring back. You tell me, is that true? Because I had no idea.
The Smith Rogue was big in the 90s, and then in 2005 at the Pittsburgh Classic, which is the all-time lowest weight, Kevin Van Dam won it on smallmouth off bridge pilings with, I want to say 13 pounds. He was throwing it on spinning rod and reel, and a lot of his, including the big bass of the tournament, which was only a 212, were caught on a old school rattling Smithwick rattling Rogue, which kind of reinvigorated that brand.
Yeah. But my point is,
That was so nerdy. Sorry.
No, it was not nerdy at all. That's not nerdy, dude. You answered the question, because this is my point. Like, I started throwing them when I started fishing the White River in Arkansas for trout with those old timers down there. Like, that was their lure. So if they were about to die and then came back because of a play that got made in the bed, cool. I don't know that. And I feel like that's what happens with a lot of these trickle down things. It's like, yeah, we use them, we loved them, but how many people really know who that started with, where that came from?
Yeah.
You know?
And the interesting thing is it's a symbiotic relationship because the tournament world is small. So a lot of the high end stuff, I agree, is, the guys who make money in the industry, they pump it back in. It's very small. It works. But those baits, like, you may not even realize when you buy a Cinco or a pack of baits or something that you're using to catch fish recreationally, that's a percentage of that deal, a royalty deal goes back to that angler who did it for that company.
Sure.
So you're putting money back in it. But then that angler also relies on someone who has never heard of him or her or tournament fishing or cares about it or ever will care about it, because there are so many recreational anglers that use that product, and they just know that when they go out, they catch fish on it. So, that angler is benefiting from a pro he's never heard of or followed, and that pro is benefiting from an angler who's not even a fan of professional bass fishing, but they're both benefiting from each other.
Sure. And to be fair, right, just in case your listeners are like screaming at me when they watch this.
No, we got all rational listeners on that.
Well, what I was going to say was, just because I'm saying that I don't think just your common, generalist angler gives that much thought to pro bass fishing in general, you're talking to a guy who does not put largemouth first. Like, of the two, I'd rather catch smallmouth, but I'd rather catch a trout before both of them, or a striper in the salt or whatever. And you run with like people, right? Most of the people that I run with and are my contacts and my friends think the same way. So just because I'm seeing that, I'm sure that there are thousands of people who cling to that and go, what is he throwing? I'm going to go buy that. It's just not my circle of people.
Was it scary going independent?
Absolutely. I'll tell you, on one hand, it's, I'm the happiest I've been in my career. No doubt. Right. I was, very burned on just corporate media in general. But yes, is it stressful? Absolutely. Is it more stressful? In a lot of ways, yes. It's different though, because it's sort of your own stress. And I know you know what I mean. It's like the problem's only yours, like, to figure out. You don't have to, make the group happy or whatever. So no, truly, I'm happier than I've ever been. But hell yeah, it's stressful. Yes.
Fall of 2022, kind of out on your own. I see it in the background there. I got the, I don't know if wait, there's mine. I got the road too there. Like, that was the hardest thing there, was just like, like, you're on your own, like, you're like setting the stuff up and you're like, oh, we'll go with this one. There's no one there telling me which one to go with. But the Cut and Retie, talk about that. Was it fall of 2022 where you kind of set out on that, that is, and kind of that listener base?
Yeah. So I left MeatEater in April of 2022, and it took some time and launched Cut and Retie, built out my little studio here, and had everything up and running. Episode 1 dropped in October of 2022. And really, it was sort of like the best of all the different worlds, right? Because I heard from so many people that were really hardcore fans of the old Hookshots podcast, which wasn't around very long, but a lot of people loved that, and I did all that editing myself. And then Bent was, in my opinion, one of the coolest fishing podcasts around. But it sounded more like a radio show where nothing went on for more than a few minutes. It was segment after segment after segment, So it was very taxing to put together. And some people really loved it, and a lot of people didn't. So third time's a charm. When I went out on my own, I said, how am I going to do this? And I said, we're going to be long form with some segments mixed in. We're not going to overwhelm anybody. And this formula seems to have worked, man. It's been going very well, and really nothing but positive feedback and growth all around. So it's been very cool.
A wide mix too, like bass, trout experiences, people, like it's not, there's no, like, there's really no walls.
No. And that's my thing. I feel like I'm one of few people who've been around this long who've stayed unsiloed, because everybody is. I mean, look, you're tied to pro bass fishing, right? There's bass podcasts. There's a million fly podcasts. We're a saltwater podcast. I don't want to be an anything podcast because I fish for everything, and I've always had this attitude. Like at the end of the day, whether you tuna fish and you bass fish and you fly fish, we're all fishing. So if we were all sitting at a bar together, we should all be able to get along and drink some beers and have a good time. And what I've been the most proud of with everything I've done, especially Cut and Retie, is I've managed to sort of build a community around that. You know, it's almost like my listeners feel like they're in a club, and I'm communicative with them, and it's been really, really great. But to your point, yes, I'm all over the place. And what I love most about what I do is I can have Ike and Ellie sitting here across from me one week. And the next week, you know, I might have two of the local fish heads and we get a sixer and a pizza and just say really stupid stuff for an hour. And that works too. Like, so it could be the local heads and a dude's hang. It could be a guy like Ike or a bigger personality or a scientist, or I really try and keep it mixed up because I don't want to get pigeonholed into being one thing.
In the about section on the Apple podcast, it says, no matter how you fish or what you fish for, Cut and Retie with Joe Cermele, never techie, always metal injected. Let your guard down and stop taking fishing so seriously because it's just fishing, man.
Yeah. That's not, I wrote that too, Matt, but that's not too cringeworthy. That wasn't too long ago.
Well done. All right. So we're going to take bass out of the equation. So you can't say red-eye, Guadalupe, Alabama spotted bass, Kentucky spotted bass, largemouth, smallmouth bass.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking to a lot of guys who primarily, you know, it might be 95% of their fishing is bass fishing.
Sure.
I want you to give me the top 5 species, not like Amazon stuff, but like that exist in rivers, lakes, areas around them that bass anglers are missing out on by not targeting.
Okay, so we're going cross country here then, right? So I got to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 1, peacock bass in Miami, right? So I did that years ago, and if you're a smallmouth guy especially, dude, like you think those fish fight, peacock bass are just absolute rippers. So I've written, I don't know how many times that, you know, one of those bucket list deals, like before you croak, if you live in the US, go down to South Florida and throw for peacock bass because they are just incredible fish. And I've done it in the Amazon where they get much bigger. Don't worry about that. Like the ones in Florida are good enough if that's where you can afford to get to. Okay. Here's one that'll really piss your guys off, but I mean it and I'll own it. Snakehead. Go catch a northern snakehead or a bullseye. I think the northerns are much more badass, but you know, I'm actually addicted to those. I spend more time in the summer fishing for snakeheads around here than anything else.
Hey, I'm not gonna lie. When I was I think there's a few on the James River, like up in the Chickahominy.
Yeah, like
we were all trying to catch one. Like we all want to. Like I'm from Oklahoma. We don't have a chance. Like I wanted to catch a damn snakehead.
Yeah. I think they're cool, man. And I know I'm not saying they're supposed to be here. I get the whole science of it, but it's like, dude, if you like throwing frogs, like how can you not?
Yeah,
how can you not?
Newton, who does his in fishing, he's big on them out there and on the Potomac.
Yes.
So so peacock bass in Miami, snakehead on a frog.
Just on top water, right? And look, they eat subsurface, but like that's not what you do that for. You want the stuff.
Snakehead on top, number 2.
Flathead catfish, man. Like I am not opposed to sitting on chunk baits, and I don't know how the bass crowd feels about flathead catfish. I think they are the most badass of all the catfish in this country, and I love them. And there's even opportunity around me. I know it's not unique to here, but there's even some opportunity to catch them on jigs and stuff at certain times a year, you know, in the spring. So I take bait fishing as seriously as anything. So I'm very big into catfish.
Like, does that get you like is that jacked up? Like when you've got that chunk of buffalo out there and what? That's potentially what you use, right?
Well, not out here, but yeah, carp or shad or whatever.
Chunk of something dead out there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you got the live bait clicker on the old Abu Garcia where it's like,
Yeah.
And it's just like you got it set up in a hole that just looks right, and all of a sudden it's, I mean, that to you gets you going, just like a guy on side imaging looking over and seeing a school of four set up on a shell bed.
Absolutely. And it drives me kind of nuts because people look at catfishing as like really dumbed down. Like, I just get a hook and stick some chicken liver on it and go. No, dude, I am pain. Like I like go through pains to do the rigging. Like, I want this length and this knot. And this, like, I take that just as seriously. And yeah, especially with flatheads in the dark, to me, that's a rush, man. That thing bends over. You don't know if it's a 2-pounder or 40-pounder or what's eating that.
Yeah.
I think catfish are overlooked by a lot of people.
Number 4,
striped bass. Now, we'll keep it freshwater because I will actually say I live, close to the coast. I've been striper fishing my whole life. I actually think that river stripers are cooler than saltwater ones in terms of the environment and how they fight. Like, a river striper will knock the snot out of a saltwater striper in terms of fight.
I wonder why.
I mean, I think it's current, and I also think it's just a lot of the drive. Like, the fish that we get right up the Delaware here in the spring, they'll be here in a few weeks. You catch a 30-pound fish here that's up here to spawn and eat. Between the current and how much madder that fish seems when you hook it, that same I will chase that fish downriver here, and I'll land it in 45 seconds on a boat in the ocean. There's something different about river stripers. I've done it on the Clinch River in Tennessee too. God, out there, man, I don't know if you've ever done that. You can catch like a 36-inch striper that weighs 36 pounds. I've never seen a fish like that tall and stout, but they rip in rivers.
Well, you mentioned the striped bass. You would know this. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who's done it. You mentioned you had an article about it before. Is there a more competitive and intense scene in the country with more unwritten rules than the surf rock fishing out like in Jersey and in that New England area? Like, everything I've ever seen on that, I was like, I would be petrified to just go try that by myself because I feel like I would instantly piss off 75 guys.
No, I mean,
am I looking at that wrong?
Well, you make it sound like you're talking about it in like a tournament sense. As if
no, it just seems like it's like those guys are incredibly intense about their spots and where they're fishing and how everyone's casting and when they're running. And there's key spots where the guys that have been doing it for 30 years are standing, and you have to have you have to work your way up to. Am I wrong on that? Am I making too much of it?
No, you're not, man. And that's like in high school and college, that was my deal, right? Surf fishing across Jersey. You'd go out to Montauk, out to the Mecca once a year, and scrabble around on the rocks. Put it to you this way. I still surf fish. I'll do it a couple times a year. I hate everything about what that scene has become. It is not the surf fishing that I grew up with. It is toxic. And you say, these guys are intense. I say it's a lot of crybabies, and I live here, so I can get away with saying that, but it is just constant mudslinging, and we're beating a dead horse, but it's pure social media. Like surf fishing has become a group sport now, when that used to be a very solitary thing. It's like maybe you and one buddy, on the rocks or on the surf, and it was like sneaking around in the dark and, figuring things out and dialing something in, and it has just become a group sport now. It's just a phone chain and a group sport. And why are you here? I found these fish, just like you said. And it's like, you know what? I'll go a couple times a year just, for the heck of it. But I do not. And any surf fisherman who's been doing it for a long time now will agree with that. Nobody's going to call BS on that. It's kind of a ridiculous scene.
Did you get in on the YouTube channel Morning Tide?
I don't think I know that one.
Australia, with Briggsy and Brooksy and Cavi.
Oh, well, I certainly know who Cavi is. Are these the Cliff guys?
These are the Aussie guys who.
Yeah.
Dude, that's my number 1A bucket list thing. I think I got about 5 years in me before I die. Before I, health wise, like where I trust everything to go do that. That looks awesome.
Yeah, and look, man, some of the hardcore guys out here, good friends of mine who still put on a wetsuit and swim out to a rock, off of Montauk in the dark. It's pretty hardcore. That stuff they do over there is a different level of hardcore. And as much as I would like to look you in the face and say like, yeah, man, I want to go do that. I don't know. I don't know if I can handle it. But I'm also 42 years old and like my balance is going to hell, and they're like standing on these ledges and fighting these GTs. So more power to those guys. But that to me, that's like the pinnacle of surf fishing, the stuff that they do over there.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And then on top of it, like half of them jump in after the fish.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of that is for safe release, right? Well, what do you do with it? Now you got it to the edge of the cliff. You got to unhook it and get it away so it doesn't die. They have no choice. I mean, these guys just get they get the snot beat out of them by the waves. It is some of the most intense stuff. It really is.
Yeah, here's like just a little scene of it. Like, I mean, that's like no mess around ocean. And they're by themselves. They get dropped off on this. He's there for 3 or 4 days. If you could hear him, like, if you could, I don't have the audio on this now, but I mean, it is so intense. Then they get in the water, they show them off.
And what's wild to me is around here, to fish the jetties and the rocks and things, you always put corkers on over your boots so that you wouldn't slide on all the algae and stuff or get washed off. You always had corkers on for grips. I look at these guys, I'm like, that dude's out there in like tennis shoes. Like, how is he doing that, man? Like, how does he not have corkers and spikes on his feet?
They're getting up there too. They got to be close to our age.
Yeah, Cavi especially. But yeah, and there was I tell you, I've always loved all the Australian content. I don't know if they're still around anymore, but the big one, like not long after I started Hook Shots, was the Mad Hueys. Remember those guys? I mean,
they sponsored Carl Jacobson for a couple years.
Yeah,
when he first fished the Elite Series.
Did some wild stuff, man. They were in the saltwater scene. The Aussies have always been so far ahead of us. So much of the cool stuff that our saltwater guys do now, like, oh yeah, we're popping tuna. All that stuff came from Australia.
Yeah, they're still posting stuff.
Are they still around? Yeah, it's been a while since I checked.
Yeah, it was. All right, number 5. We've got peacock bass in Miami. We have snakehead on top. We have flathead catfish on basically whatever you want to catch and cut up. And then you have striped bass, specifically freshwater river striped bass.
River striper. All right, I'll throw one more knot out there. How about I would say wild brown trout. Wild being the key, and here's why I say that, because of all the trout in this country, they are the most aggressive. They are the coolest as far as I'm concerned. And I always look at brown trout specifically as like the largemouth bass of the trout game, right? They're wild ones. Again, we're not talking about stocked fish or lake run fish that they put in Erie and stuff. I'm talking about a wild stream bred trout, either out west or in the northeast or White River, wherever it may be. I think especially for bass guys, you think of trout as these small things and stock trout, and it's very easy. You like you said, Matt, you've never met a brown trout that won't smack a jerkbait. If you go into that game looking for the big ones, for the ones you can measure in pounds instead of inches, that is not, dancing around on a little trout stream trying to catch a little fish. Like if you go to the right water and fish aggressively for a big fish, wild brown trout are one of my 2 favorite fish. I got a tattoo on my leg of wild brown and a striper crossing over New Jersey. So those are my fresh and my salt, the 2 that I never get tired of.
Oh, that's cool.
But a big wild brown trout. And I don't care where it is. Michigan, Montana, doesn't matter. I think everybody should catch one. And I don't care how you catch it. I'm not going to tell you learn to fly fish. You do you throw the rattling rogue at it, whatever you want to do. But they are incredible fish.
We had a Bassmaster Elite Series that I covered on Bull Shoals. There was a day canceled because of weather. A lot of guys were staying right there at the White River, and Steve Kennedy pulled out a 6-inch Huddleston, top hook Huddleston, and went down by where that dam is on the White, and was pulling gigantic brown trout on almost every cast that thought they were their stalker rainbows and were just like shadows behind it. Giant brown trout.
Yeah, I think if you're not in the trout scene, you have people have this habit of thinking of trout as sort of like punks, like, oh, they're not aggressive and they eat little bugs and all this stuff. No, man, a big brown trout is a predator, and I have seen them just do some incredible things, tank flies that you'd never think, fly this big that you'd never think a 22-inch brown trout would go after. They're gnarly fish. They're extremely aggressive, but you have to fish for them in a way that's going to trigger that aggression. It'd probably be less impressive to somebody to catch one on a, floating a little trout magnet or a little jig or something, but a big stick bait, a big streamer, a big swim bait like that. Dude, there's places around here I'm throwing glide baits at them and they don't always connect. But I mean, to be working a glide bait in a river and see a 23-inch brown just arc up out of nowhere and take the shot, like, yeah, that gets my blood pumping. But that's not how most people who don't trout fish think of trout fishing.
A couple more non-bass fishing related questions, just because I'm interested and I know you know the answers. Didn't the tuna just go absolutely nuts off the East Coast a couple months ago?
A couple months ago, they were sort of hanging on in the Carolinas.
Where was it? There was somewhere in Jersey I was reading and I saw some stuff where it was just pandemonium, where it was like, we've never seen this many giants at bigs. And then I saw photos and videos of it. And I mean, it looked like Woodstock.
Yeah, this late summer and fall for bluefin was pretty incredible. And sadly, I don't tuna fish as much as I used to, least of all the giants, like the true giants. But yeah, and there's a bunch of theories on why that is, but a lot of it is because we've just had such an incredible amount of bait inshore for a long period of time through the fall that, yeah, actually the last 2 years in terms of big bluefin, Jersey, Long Island, it's been incredible. And it's been so good at times that guys who barely have the equipment, you get these Italian guys in Staten Island, like, yeah, we're taking a bayliner out to catch it. And they do it. They go 2 miles offshore and the dude's dragging a 600-pound tuna back. I'm like, how the hell did he pull that off? But there have been times when it's been that silly that guys who are not even tuna guys are like, yeah, we'll go out there and throw some papas at them. It's been good.
One industry question, then I'll let you go. I greatly appreciate over an hour of your time on a Thursday evening to record this. What is the fishing industry as a whole like, outside of the bass fishing where we already talked about that, but in your opinion, that post-COVID where everyone was fishing, it seemed like the numbers were through the roof. We saw fishing sales, we saw all that. Now we're in 2025. In your opinion, is it growing? Just the fishing as a whole? Is there a lot of momentum going to it? Is there a lot of new blood and infusion in the sport? You deal with guys from a cross section of society that love to fish. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think it's still growing. The fishing industry from behind the scenes right now, I mean, you certainly know this too. It's funny because things were so good during the pandemic in terms of the fishing industry being profitable, and now it's gotten kind of odd. It's getting a little bit tougher, but that's weird to me because I see more people fishing. So it's this odd thing of like, this sport seems to be growing. Like last time I checked, I believe license sales were still up. Like in the States, I buy for New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey every year. But the industry in terms of tackle, I see struggling a little bit right now, sort of post pandemic and, economy shakeup or whatever it may be. But I don't think that, there's the old joke, like, let's go back to the way it used to be when fishing was lame. Like, when nobody did it, which is funny because even, as a side note to it, it's like, I'll get young people reach out all the time and go, can you help me get to where you are? Like, I'm in college now or whatever. I want to do what you do. And I'm like, man, the thing is though, when I graduated, there were not a lot of 20-year-old kids clamoring to be full-timers at a fishing magazine, right? Now, everybody wants to do that. Everybody's a writer, everybody's a blogger, everybody's a YouTuber. So I don't see it slowing down. And it's sort of a catch-22 for guys like you and me, right? Because on one hand, I could rattle off 10 spots where I'm like, well, that place is screwed because everybody found it and there's a million people there now. But I also got into this business to promote the sport of fishing, to get people excited about going out there and fishing. So, of the two options, do I want to be bitter or do I want to be happy about it? I have to be more happy than bitter because that's what I got into this for, was to have some small way, some little part to, there's nothing I love more than when a listener writes me and says, man, I hadn't picked up a fly rod in 10 years, but hearing you and so rapping about it, like you inspired me to go try it again or do it again. That's the payout. That's what you want, you know?
Where can people follow you, see your goings ons, what you have coming up, follow Cut and Retie, give all the socials, websites?
Yeah, man. So I am at Joe Cermele 138 on Instagram. I don't have a separate Cut and Retie account. All the behind the scenes, anything related to me or the show or anything I'm working on is on that account. And Cut and Retie is pretty much on any platform you could possibly want. There's always one guy who'll be like, but is it here? And I'm like, I've never heard of that one. But all the majors, Spotify, Google, Apple, all of them.
And when do the episodes drop every week?
So I'm weekly show every Friday morning at 5 a.m. Eastern. It'll kick off your weekend very nicely. It's funny, that was our time slot at MeatEater with Bent, and we didn't think that was going to work, and it ended up being great for a fishing podcast, so I kept it.
Yeah, everyone's headed to the lake then.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anything else that you just have a burning desire to get in here before I let you go?
I don't think so, Matt. But this is, dude. Again, man. I'm so pumped that you had me on. This was
that was fun. So here's the deal: I have to finish in the top 50 in the Bassmaster EQs in Division 2, and if I do that, I make the EQs, where they then ask for $9,000 more, and you have to drive across the country to compete in 3, where you then have a 1 in 15 chance of making the Elite Series in 26. But one of those events is the EQs is at Lake Champlain.
Okay.
Along that way, one of my favorite fisheries on earth is that Thousand Islands area, Lake Ontario. It's in that time. Should I make a miraculous turnaround and start catching fish at Kentucky Lake, Norfolk, and Leech and make that, dude, I would love to jump in the boat with you for a couple days at Thousand Islands. We'll put in right there at Clayton. So if it's a little windy, we can stay right there in the river. We can hit some key drifts with a little a Beast Coast tungsten jig, maybe a drop shot, maybe slide up, throw a little hair for some sight. And if it's nice, we'll truck out to the Ducks, maybe head over to the islands and see if we can't put a 30-pound bag of small jaws together.
I would be there in a heartbeat, man. So if that's happening, you let me know, because I would like to get you on Cut and Retie at some point down the road. But if the first one was in person, I always prefer in person, right? If I can do it. If you're up there, man, I will come up, bring the equipment. We'll do some fishing and lay one down.
All right, long time in the making. I greatly appreciate it. Thoroughly enjoyed a little bit different episode of Bass Talk Live, but I'll say this by closing by saying one thing. When I took over, I had a Mark Jeffries, you found in the show. He did this for 18, 19 years, and he walks in. He said, "Hey, I'm done in January. It's yours." That was over 3 years ago now. I really struggled on like who I'm going to have on. What's my content going to be? It didn't take me that much longer. Like, I feel like I struggled a little bit at the beginning. When I said, screw it, I find this interesting. I like this guest, and it's something that it's a guest that I would enjoy talking to. I feel like the quality of the content went through the roof.
And that's what I do week over week, man. A lot of it's like, do I want to talk to this guy? And I've found the same thing most of the time. If you enjoy it, if you're having a good talk, your listeners like it too.
Joe, take it easy. Thanks for jumping on.
Anytime, Matt. Appreciate it.
All right, there you go. Joe Cermele, host of Cut and Retie, also a long career, almost 2 decades career in the outdoor, specifically the fishing industry, not the bass industry. We're going to take our final break of the show, and we come back, wrap things up, and put a bow on it. So BTL on a Monday. We'll be back right after this.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
Beatdown is efficient.
Rock solid.
100% American made.
This thing is super tough. I mean, this thing is not going anywhere.
I've ran the Beatdown double stack from Florida all the way up to New York. And the one thing that I know is when I get to my fishing destination, I never have to worry about issues with my graph mount.
Your options are endless with these mounts, but they're steady, they're solid. These are the most reliable mounts on the market, and you can't go wrong with the Beatdown.
When you're ready to hit the water, Denali Fishing has you covered. Regardless of your skill level, from beginner all the way up to tournament pro, Denali has rods, reels, and tungsten to get the job done. Check them out at denalifishing.com.
Your early morning mentality is your every hour mentality. All gas, no brakes. Focus, purpose, power. Destined for the water, but confident everywhere else. A calming buzz before the storm, the truth of nature itself. You can't catch lightning in a bottle. There's a limit out there, but it's not with your gear. Unrelenting power delivery. Unparalleled weight savings. Keeping you on the water, whether you run a 9.9 or outscoping your best 5. In this rare air, there's power in the silence. It's a mindset, thinking only of the things that matter and freeing your mind from the things that you trust.
All right, welcome back. Wrapping things up. I really enjoyed that show. Like I said, I've been following Joe since I was in my 20s, doing his own thing. Kind of a very parallel things. I've been in front of a lot of people there with the field and stream editor for 12 years. I just ask him a lot about difference. Like, there's so many good people, so passionate about the bass fishing industry, but almost look at it like a family. Like, you know, like you have your family may look different from the outside. Like, everyone be like, oh man, that's like the perfect family. And in some instances, the people on the outside don't see the dysfunction potentially in the family, but then they also don't get to see the personalities and how there's actually a lot of people that have each other's back. And it really is like a family. So not at all like negative when I was asking him about like how the other fishing communities kind of view the tournament bass anglers. But I do think it is very easy to get caught in. I mean, we're like really nitpicking like individual words and rules and things. I think that's good. I think you have to police it. I think you have to be dive. I think you have to be committed to it. But at the same time, I think sometimes you have to take a step back and say, man, look at this awesome community that we've built as anglers, that we care about it, that we have the platforms that we can fish on, that we have the resources, that we have the tools, that we have all of this. And that was a good reset show. I hope I'm catching them on Kentucky. It looks like it might be a little rough, but you know what the beauty thing about a rough tournament is? You find out one little thing, ride it all the way to victory. Or check, or 100th place finish, or 150th, or a top 10. Like, you never know where it's going to go. It's the beauty of fishing. You could be positive that you're going to crush them. You can go out and suck. You can be positive that you're going to suck. You go out and crush them. You can lose fish that you're supposed to land. You can land fish that you're supposed to lose. Anyway, I digress. All right, stay tuned to basszone.com or basstalklive.com. I'll have a little bit of a schedule out for the live show on Tuesday. Also working on debuting a new new little subset, a little mini set in case you just want a quick little bite about like the news, things that went on in the world of professional bass fishing over the week. No opinions, just objective, you know, who won this on what tournament with how much weight on what bait and what went on in the industry and so in 5 or 10 minutes. You can drink a cup of coffee. If you have a short commute, if you're on the treadmill, you can listen to it. It's called Best on Tour this week. So big shout out to Best on Tour for sponsoring that segment. And there's going to be a segment that's going to come out every Tuesday called Best on Tour this week. It's going to be a standalone segment, just a little 5 to 10 minute thing on what's happening in the industry. So this has been another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live. Talk to everyone later. See ya.